What is the hierarchy of controls? The hierarchy of controls is a step by step approach to eliminating or reducing workplace hazards. It ranks controls from the most effective level of protection to the least effective level of protection. When choosing a control method, start from the top of the inverted pyramid. Assess the feasibility of the first layer of the controls, elimination, before moving on to the second layer, substitution. Continue this process until you reach of the bottom of the pyramid and have identified as many controls as needed to that will adequately protect the worker from the hazard. This is a short, quick introduction of hierarchy of controls. We'll discuss in detail. The hierarchy of control is a six-stage method of control measures you can use to eliminate or reduce risks in the workplace. The hierarchy of control is a risk control method that sets out approaches you can use to control risks and hazards in the workplace in order of implementation, with the highest controls being those that eliminate or substitute the risk. Dear friends and fellows, the hierarchy of control is a structured approach to selecting appropriate control measures to eliminate or reduce risks you have identified in your workplace. There are six stages in the hierarchy of control. Number one, elimination. Number two, substitution. Number three, isolation. Number four, engineering controls. Number five, administrative controls. And number six, personal protective equipment, PPE. You are on the platform of safety first life. If you are first time on this channel, kindly subscribe it and press the bell icon for all future notifications. And if you find the video informative, then like, comment, and share it with your friends and colleagues. Let us start with the first element, that is elimination. The first stage in the hierarchy of control is to control a health and safety risk. You should first consider whether you can remove the risk of exposure to the hazard completely. Elimination removes the hazard at the source. This could include changing the work process to stop using a toxic chemical, heavy object, or a sharp tool. It is the preferred solution to protect workers because no exposure can occur. As I told you, elimination is the most effective control measure. It involves eliminating the hazard and its associated risk. The best way to eliminate a hazard is to not introduce the hazard in the first place. For example, you can eliminate the risk of a fall from height by doing the work at ground level. Eliminating hazards can be cheaper and more practical at the design or planning stage of a product, process, or workplace. In these early stages, there is more scope to design to eliminate hazards or to include risk control measures that are compatible with the requirements of the original design and function. Employers can also eliminate hazards and risks by removing the hazard completely. For example, removing trip hazards on the floor or disposing of unwanted chemicals eliminates the risk they create. It may not be possible to eliminate a hazard if doing so means you are unable to make the end product or deliver the service. If it is not possible to eliminate the hazard, then you must eliminate as many of the risks associated with the hazard as possible. You have to clarify one important point. You need to remove the hazards. If not possible, then in the elimination stage, you need to eliminate the risks as much as possible. Let us understand this first point of hierarchy of controls, that is elimination, with few examples. Elimination is the process of removing the hazard from the workplace. It is the most effective way to control a risk because the hazard is no longer present. It is the preferred way to control a hazard and should be used whenever possible. Examples of elimination control methods include: number one, purchasing equipment that is not noisy. Number two, using a reach pole where feasible for window washing to eliminate working from heights and to minimize the chances of falls from height. Number three, removing and properly disposing of products that are stored in the workplace and are no longer being used. And number four, avoiding driving during extreme winter weather conditions. These are the few examples of elimination. And this is the first point in hierarchy of controls, that is elimination. Let us discuss now point number two, substitution. What do you understand by substitution in the hierarchy of controls? If a risk cannot be eliminated, consider substituting it with a less dangerous alternative. If you are unable to eliminate a health and safety risk, determine whether you can control the risk by substituting it with a less hazardous or non hazardous alternative. Let us understand substitution with examples. If the use of a forklift poses a risk to health and safety in your workplace, consider whether less hazardous plant, such as an unpowered forklift, can be used to move materials and supplies. Second example of substitution: you may be able to substitute a chemical with a less hazardous one, or use a chemical in a form that reduces the chance of exposure. For example, a paste instead of a powder. So this is the way how you can reduce, you can remove the hazard, or you can reduce the level of risk. Substitution. Let us discuss now point number three, isolation. Dear friends and fellows, you are on the platform of safety first life, and today we are discussing about the hierarchy of controls. What is isolation? If you are unable to eliminate or substitute the hazard, try reducing the risk by enclosing or isolating it. For example, when using a forklift in the workplace poses a health and safety risk, consider isolating the area where the forklift will be used. For example, consider whether you can install barriers to separate pedestrians from the path of moving forklifts, or isolate areas where forklifts operate from other work areas, for example, loading bays. Second example of isolation might be if using hazardous chemicals, try separating incompatible chemicals. Chemicals can be separated by using barriers or distance. Information about a chemical's incompatibilities can be found in its safety data sheet SDS. And this is the way how you can isolate the hazards, you can isolate the risk from exposure to the workers. Element number four of hierarchy of controls, engineering controls. If you cannot use the first three measures, elimination, substitution, or isolation, then put engineering controls in place to eliminate or reduce the risk. Examples of engineering controls include relocation of hazardous items or processes and installation of safety systems, for example, guards. Let us understand engineering controls by using example. If the use of a forklift truck poses a risk to health and safety, consider whether it is possible to engineer alternatives to the forklift. For example, moving materials through the workplace on conveyor belts or fixed tracks. Alternatively, Consider whether you can reduce the risk by engineering risk controls such as arranging racks in the warehouse so that pedestrians and forklift drivers always have a clear view of each other. Another example of engineering controls installing lighting in the work environment to increase the visibility of forklifts, installing signs, flashing lights, and beepers to identify the presence of a forklift truck, and painting pedestrian walkways on floors where the work is ongoing or where the forklift trucks are moving time to time. Second example might be for hazardous chemicals to prevent the escape of hazardous substances or fumes. You can use engineering controls such as bonding and ventilation systems. In this way, you can control the hazards and risks at your workplace to protect workers from injury or harm. Let us discuss now element number 5 of hierarchy of controls, that is administrative controls. Administrative controls should only be used in conjunction with higher level controls to minimize risks. Example of administrative controls include safety signs, training, supervision, and scheduling of work. The examples of administrative controls are number one, if the use of a forklift poses a risk to health and safety, and despite implementing a higher level control, the risk remains, consider administrative controls such as identifying areas in your health and safety policies where pedestrian access is not allowed, training staff in those policies, and providing workers with adequate supervision. These all are the administrative controls. But when you have to put administrative controls when remaining all elimination, isolation, substitution, and engineering controls are not in use and you need further, and still there is the risk and there is the presence of hazards, so you can try to control the hazard through administrative controls. The second example of administrative control might be for hazardous substances. You can use administrative controls to limit exposure. For example, using safety signs or limiting access to areas containing hazardous substances. But you have to remember, never rely on an administrative control alone. Administrative controls will rarely be sufficient on their own to minimize or adequately reduce the risks. Hierarchy of controls. Element number 6, personal protective equipment, PPE. Dear friends and fellows, personal protective equipment is not sufficient in risk control when implemented exclusively in conjunction with higher level controls. You may require your workers to wear personal protective equipment while near the risk. Examples of PPE include safety goggles, gloves, earplugs, high vis vests, and safety boots, etc. Here you have to remember PPE is the lowest stage of hierarchy and should not be used exclusively to control a risk. It is rarely effective if used alone. You should only use this stage to control any residual risk that remains after stages higher in the hierarchy have been put in place. For example, if the risk of using a forklift cannot be completely controlled by using one or more of the higher level controls, issue all workers and visitors to the site with PPE, such as high visibility clothing, to be worn in areas where forklift is operating. So this is the last resort, personal protective equipment. While in the case of hazardous chemicals, if the risk using hazardous chemicals cannot be completely controlled by using higher level controls, the use of gloves, respirators, and eye masks can assist in reducing exposure. A short training session on the topic of hierarchy of controls with examples is over. If you have any question, please ask in the comment section. Thanks for watching and don't forget to like, comment, and share the video. Hope to see you soon with a new HSC tutorial. Until then, take care, good luck, and goodbye.